Now we have the opportunity to learn from a panel of speakers, and we are thrilled that Emily DeBoer is leading and moderating this panel for us. Emily is part of a cohort of churches. There are 5 churches in Northwest Iowa who are working together over 13 months, committing to helping their church be more welcoming and accessible for people with disabilities. So we're going deep together, hoping to make long-term changes in those congregations together. So Emily, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Lindsay. My name is Emily DeBoer, and I'm a 46-year-old white woman. I have blue eyes, light brown hair, I think, resting past my shoulders. And today I am wearing a light brown shirt with a blue jean jacket, some gold hoop earrings, and I am smiling because I like to smile. I'm nervous, but I'm still smiling. I just wanted to remind our panelists today before we begin to restate your name each time that you talk. That will help us know who is talking. And I think we'll start with Mike.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Emma. My name's Mike Walker. I am a man with spastic cerebral palsy in his late 30s. I'm mostly bald with hazel eyes. I've never brought down a plague of bears on any teenagers, though, unlike Elisha. I am wearing a lovely salmon shirt that my sister-in-law bought me a while ago. I live in Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada. I was raised Presbyterian. I converted swiftly to Anglicanism in my late 20s because of their focus on justice. And I now consider myself sort of ecumenical. I'm a classic rock nerd, and I love to make biryani, which is an Indian dish, like the subcontinent India, with chicken and rice. Shall I go on to the first question, or are we going to pass the ball back and forth a bit?
I think, Mike, thank you for that. I think we're going to move on and we're going to introduce each person, and then we'll come back to the questions. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. Okay, Josh, you're up next.
Hello, I'm Josh. I am white with blonde hair and blue eyes, and I wear glasses, of course. I am the music and worship leader at Friends to Friends Community Church, and I am very glad to be here. And I know that, as you could tell, the Zoom is very amazing. I think that, especially with its technical difficulties, as Pastor Joanne and I say, Zoom can still be a very amazing place for all of us to gather. So thank you.
Thank you, Josh. I agree with you about Zoom. Okay, next we have Cassie.
Yes, I am Cassie Locker, and like Josh, I am a worship and music director. Had the privilege of leading you in worship and music earlier. Feels like this morning, but I guess it was technically this afternoon. I am from Western Wisconsin, and as stated in my earlier introduction, I am visually impaired. I am a white woman in her early 40s with, I guess, medium brown to dark hair, reaching to about my chin or below the ears. I do have underdeveloped eyes, so if I look a little squinty or tired, it's probably because of that. And other than that, I think that's about it. But yeah, I do serve as church advocate in my own congregation too for people with disabilities. So that's me.
Thank you, Cassie. And now to Wade.
Hello, my name is Wade Coonan, and I'm a white male in my 40s. I'm wearing a greenish sweatshirt. I have a scruffy beard and a little goatee, and yeah, I'm a pastor as well, as some of you are, and I work for Hope Haven now at the moment as a peer support worker. That's someone with mental disabilities who's helping others with mental disabilities. I was diagnosed with schizophrenia in 2015, so that's the opportunity that I have to reach others who are broken as well in the same way that I am. So I count it a blessing in a way, even though I'm continually striving to for holistic healing, like we heard.
Thank you, Wade. I appreciate that. We're just gonna move on. Thank you for introducing yourselves very well. And I just want to remind you that each time when you speak, if you can say your name, that would be helpful to know who's talking. And I think we'll just start with where you are located. And some of you have already answered this, and that's okay too. You can restate it. But where are you located and your connection to the church or ministry? And maybe one or two things about yourself that you would like to share. And we can start with Mike, if that's okay.
You bet. Where I'm located, sorry, this is Mike. I'm located in Old Ottawa South, which is roughly downtown Ottawa, the capital of Canada, in the National Capital Region. My affiliation with the church, like I said, I was born a Presbyterian a long, long time ago in a galaxy far away on the East Coast. And I converted to Anglicanism, my mother's faith, in my late 20s. And I kind of consider myself a citizen of the universe, which is part of how I'm here, but I'm not exactly sure that that's entirely fair. And then, like I said, I love classic rock music, listen to it almost all the time. I've branched into hip hop though as well. And yeah, I like to cook. I was making pasta last night. I make chili and biryani an awful lot. That's me.
Thank you, Mike. That sounds good. I wish I could cook those things. Okay, Josh, if you want to share a little bit about yourself, a church ministry that you belong to or a part of, yeah. And then two things about yourself.
Hi, it's Josh here again. I am from New Jersey, of course. I am in Waldwick, New Jersey, which is a county is Bergen County, of course. We are in the United States. We are located, and Friends to Friends Community Church is located in Ridgewood, New Jersey. It's a very broad, diverse community, and that embraces disabilities and special needs and autism, and it's very nice. So, and we have a lot of advocates out there. So, I was raised in a Reformed church, and I've always been part of the RCA, the Reformed Church of America, for as long as I can remember, since the day I was born. So I could tell you, and I think that's for me, Friends to Friends. If I can remember, yes. So how I got to Friends was my father and I. We were introduced to Friends through a person of the RCA. His name is Terry DeYoung, and he told us about Friends to Friends. And at the time, Friends to Friends was only a missionary in the church, which in this old congregation called the First Reformed Church of Ridgewood. And so basically, what happened was my father and I went. We met the former pastor before Pastor Joanne, and then in 2014, as we fast forward, Friends to Friends Community Church became a congregation of its own, and Pastor Joanne came the year later, and we welcomed her with open arms. And ever since she came, we've been attending Friends to Friends, and we've been helping her, and I've been serving my gifts and abilities by being, as I said, the music and worship director. And so it's a wonderful gift. So and my father is also an elder too, and he's helped out in Friends to Friends many ways too. So thank you very much for me to share that.
You bet. Thank you, Josh. And Cassie?
Yeah, so this is Cassie. I live in, as I said, Western Wisconsin. Closest big city might be St. Paul or Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I live very close to the border, I'd say within about 30 miles. And so as a result, I have to be very vocal and prideful about my favorite football team, which hopefully you know would be from Wisconsin. And so I wear that badge of honor, even though I live very close to Minnesota Viking territory. But I do enjoy football. I enjoy riding my tricycle. It keeps me active, even though I don't have the best vision. And on a more serious note, I do and continue to lead worship and music in my local church. We are a Reformed church congregation, no longer with the RCA, but I have been employed at that church for 12 wonderful long years and feel so blessed and honored that they hired me, even though I have a physical disability, and they've just been a huge encouragement to me as a local church community. So very, very proud to say that I belong to that community of believers.
Thank you, Cassie. And Wade, I know that you had spoken some of yourself before, but you can surely share again.
Yeah, my name's Wade. Yeah, I talk a lot, so talking isn't a problem for me.
That's okay.
So yes, some of the things that I like to do, I like to read. I read a lot, and broadly. Theology is probably one of my go-tos, but biographies, self-help, anything that will help me get better and grow as a person. And I also am a sports fanatic. I love the Vikings and the Twins and the Yankees. Don't ask me how they all fit together, but that's those are some of the teams that I like. And yeah, I have a dog too that is kind of a therapy dog, and I'm passionate about him. And my family is important to me. They're an important part of the way that I've become a better person, but also how I've healed from some of the trauma that was associated with my diagnosis. So somewhat something about me.
Thank you, Wade. This is Emily, and I am going to start with question number 2. How has the way we talk about healing narratives in the Bible impacted you? Mike, would you like to begin?
Sure. Thanks.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm like a vampire. You have to ask me to come in first. This is Mike. First, I want to know what the question means by we. Who is the we that we're interrogating? So when I say we, I mean everyone in this Zoom room. We got to be careful about how we uncritically use second and third person pronouns, because the way that churches use you and we often tells us what they think and how they think about who's in and who's out, who's included and who's excluded. Plus, the ways that Christians discuss healing narratives are many and varied. We'll have to start with the portrayal of people with disabilities and chronic illnesses in the text itself. With some folks, as we know, the Lord Jesus offers agency. So Bartimaeus in Mark chapter 10 is a great example. Jesus meets him exactly where he is and asks him, "What do you want me to do for you?" And Bartimaeus says, "Lord, I want to see again." And then he can see, and he follows Jesus along the road to the cross. It's super cool. But in other passages, as with the guy with the withered hand in Luke 6, or the deaf mute fella, I think that's Mark 7, I'm not sure. The person with disabilities is more of a prop for Jesus to demonstrate his healing powers. So the text varies in terms of the way it treats disability. And so Christians of all stripes have to use these texts with care. Finally, in terms of the way Christians discuss healing narratives, I find most of those discussions very simplistic. Many believers of able body, no one in this Zoom room, but many people I've talked to, use disability as a concept that reifies God's power or inscrutable will. So I've had people say to me that I was given cerebral palsy for a reason, or I experienced mental health issues for a reason, or suffering exists for a reason. Great. So I have light chronic pain and constant spatial disorientation for a reason. Would you mind telling me what that reason is? Because I don't know. Or again, to demonstrate God's power. What kind of loving deity would be so cruel as to give people impairments that make it harder for them to get around, or to navigate aspects of our already callous and capitalist society? So in short, the way the healing narratives impact me is to get me to use my writing and my facilitation skills in workshops like this one, to advocate for a more accessible world for everybody. And by everybody, I mean everybody.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. And thank you for the reminder of wording, how we say things, how we include, disclude. Yeah, thank you very much. Josh, I know that you were gone earlier, and I'm not sure if you were here during when we were talking about biblical stories of people that had disabilities. So I'm not sure if you want to pass on this question or if you want to answer.
I think I was on, was it before this one? I think, or was it in the beginning?
Good question. It was at the beginning. It was one of the first ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll pass on this one because
that's fine.
Yeah, but but thank you very much for including me in that.
Yep, you're welcome, Josh. Cassie, would you like to answer the question, or would you like me to read it again?
I think I can answer without having it in front of me, but thanks, because I was just thinking, oh no, should I go read it again? Yeah, I don't have much more to add other than what was brought up just a few minutes ago, just about like the reason for someone having a disability, or God must have given you this disability for a reason. I do go back to the story, I believe it's in John 9, with Jesus healing the blind man. And my mom actually read that story when I was 3 days old. And they knew right away that I was blind, but they didn't know why. And she read the story and immediately was praying that God would heal me, or at least provide a miracle, or give she and my dad a reason as to, why did this happen to us? Because I was their firstborn child. As everyone might expect, you're excited to have a newborn baby, and then suddenly it's, well, no, now your baby is blind and we don't know why. And so I have been asked over the years, why do you think God created you to be blind? And then, why haven't you been healed, for example? And of course, there have been times through my life I've prayed for healing or asked God why. But I think as I've grown up and become accustomed to the fact that my disability isn't going anywhere, and even though I have faith that God could heal me, he probably will not in my lifetime. And so then what is my goal? How do I serve God with the realization that my situation isn't going to change? And so what was referenced in the earlier presentations about how the man wasn't born blind because of any sin he had, it was more because God's glory or his works could be seen in him. And of course, that can be taken in so many different directions, but I choose to see it as, okay, so I've been given this disability. And sometimes that means people ask me questions, or they're curious, or they want to know why. And so I just need to do my part in being a good example of God's love in me, to try to be positive, to try to at least, give the impression, I guess, that God is faithful and that he can still use someone with a disability, even though there are limitations present. So I don't know if that exactly answers the question, but when I look at healing narratives, I don't always look at, okay, Jesus healed the person. I like to dig a little deeper and maybe ask, what does this mean for me in my particular situation or in the modern context, I guess. That's all.
I think you answered it very well. I appreciate your response. Thank you. And Wade, do you have a response to the question?
This is Wade. So, yeah, I found it very helpful earlier today when the speaker talked about healing being holistic. Back when I had my psychotic break, I lost my denomination, my congregation, my family, and my health. And right after that, 2 jobs. So everything was broken and fractured. The only thing that I really had was my family, and I tried to push them away as well. So when I think of healing, I think of more how God has pieced those broken things back together, and how that I am finding renewed health and strength through the mending of those areas. I guess learning from the way that the church and denomination handled me when I was sick is something that I could pass on and share too, like what the church shouldn't do. The church, when I was sick, they shouldn't have treated me like a theological problem instead of a person who was sick. And I wish that they could go back, and we could go back and mend that and heal that broken area today. So, yeah, I hope I answered some of that question. So anyway.
You answered it very well. Thank you. This is Emily, and we're going to go to question number 3. What do you think are the barriers that get in the way of churches being hospitable to people with disabilities? And if you're okay starting again, Mike.
Yep, I am. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I could talk about this question for hours, and we don't have that kind of time, so I just wrote the one paragraph. The barriers are 3. First, barriers are attitudinal. They're based in people's worldviews and attitudes inside and outside the church, right? Second, they're structural in terms of physical space. That one I could go on about for hours, and we can talk about that later. And they have to do with communication. They're communicative in terms of the way that people exchange linguistic and other symbols and signs to make themselves understood. All 3 of those kinds of barriers intersect and interlock in troubling ways for people like us, believers with disabilities in churches.
Thank you, Mike. You can articulate that very well. Thank you.
Years of practice.
And Josh, would you like to answer that question?
Sure, this is Josh, of course. I think that same thing I can just like Mike said, actually, I go on for this for hours, but I think talking about, as you said, the question is about what was the question again? I am so sorry to.
Oh, you're just fine. The question is, what do you think are the barriers that get in the way of churches being hospitable to people with disabilities?
Well, so I believe that as a church, this is Josh speaking. I'm going to say this. So I think that there are churches that are not like Friends to Friends, that are not accessible. They don't have any ramps. They don't have anything that they don't have any programs for individuals with autism and special needs and disabilities. And so I think that they don't really allow really allow individuals with disabilities to share their gifts. Like sometimes they are so closed-minded, that's I think they feel that they're not perfect, and they seem like it's like they don't want them to play an instrument or read scripture. Like those churches have such, or it's got to be that person. They're not as open to that. Like they think that someone without disabilities is perfect. Like they just have such a closed-minded, and they're so it's one, and this is why so I think with the friends, we're such a role model for churches. We're showing churches how to be accessible and how to be more open to allowing those with autism and disabilities to share their gifts. And so it's really important to just be open and and have and be welcoming and affirming and inclusiveness. It's a wonderful thing. So yeah, I hope churches will follow that. So
I hope so too. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cassie, would you like to answer that question?
Yes. Yeah. So I will kind of, I guess, continue after Josh in a way that, like, I think the best way I would interpret that question, like one of the biggest barriers would probably just be lack of education or lack of knowledge. Sometimes what people in a church don't know can actually inhibit accessibility or hospitality. I've heard over the years, being a disability advocate and being the worship leader, I will get up in front of church, for example, on a Disability Awareness Sunday, and I'll say, hey, my name is Cassie. I'm the disability advocate here. If anyone needs anything related to disability, if there are any accessibility needs, if you're having trouble hearing or seeing our services, basically, if there's anything that we can do for you to be more open or hospitable or accessible, let me know. And I'll hear afterward, like, oh, well, I guess I never really realized we had people with disabilities here. And I kind of laugh because I'm obviously visually impaired. I can't hide that. So there's one person in the congregation, and that's me. But I also think there are a lot of people in our congregations, especially our smaller rural congregations, where we have a high percentage of people who are aging. And with aging comes disabilities that are acquired or health conditions. And those people aren't necessarily identifying as having disabilities. They're just saying, okay, I'm getting older and that's what happens. And so I think it just comes down to a disability advocate continuing to be that person and saying, hey, there are resources, we're here, and creating education and saying there are things we can do in our churches, and just being open to continue to share and to continue to advocate. Because if we don't tell them what we need, then there's never going to be anything done. And sometimes it can be exhausting. I feel like sometimes I'm the only voice. I'm the only one who's talking. I'm the only one who's advocating. But sometimes if you're the one living with the disability, you have to talk about it, because if you don't, then maybe nothing will get done because your church doesn't know what you need. So in a roundabout way, I guess that's my answer, is just the barrier is lack of education or lack of knowledge. And we as advocates, we can provide that if we're willing.
I agree with you. Thank you, Cassie, for advocating. And Wade, how would you like to answer that question?
And this is Wade. I think some of the barriers that I've encountered are stigma of mental illness and of schizophrenia specifically. Like it's kind of like a sentence that is lifelong, and it comes with strange behavior or perceived strange behavior. So people react to that, and sometimes ways that I wish they wouldn't. But also, for myself, like, how do I respond to the disability that I have? And one of the ways is shame and guilt, even though I shouldn't have, I still do. I'm ashamed of the things that I've done or the way that I'm perceived even. So what's helped me is even thinking about it today, that God sees me as perfect and not as imperfect, and God sees me as whole and not as not whole. I'm a person who is loved in God's eyes unconditionally, and that helps me heal and helps me overcome those barriers, even to overcome the barriers that others put up in front of me.
Thank you. Amen. Okay, our next question. What are the things you or others have done to help your church be a healthier environment for you or other people with disabilities? And I think we touched a little bit on that, but please share more if you feel like you should or want to. Mike?
You bet. Thanks, Emily. This is
Yep.
Mike. So just speaking for myself, several things. I wrote a doctoral dissertation at the University of Toronto about how baptism and communion can help people with disabilities, folks like us, to be active, vital members of inclusive churches. With the Ontario College of Art and Design, I took part in a project called Our Doors Are Open, where on a team of 6 people, I edited a guide for accessible congregations, helping churches, synagogues, mosques, and other folks to include people with disabilities more broadly. And then based on that guide, my colleagues and I gave a series of at least 30 webinars and seminars on what we called inclusive thinking, strategies for how to include us. Following that, I taught a course at North Park Theological Seminary in Chicago based on my dissertation research in 2019 and 2020, where I helped 8 students in 2 different sections to interrogate and change their models of disability and help them learn to audit physical spaces for accessibility. And since North Park, I've worked on a couple different projects with the Abilities Center Durham and Carleton University. I work at Carleton now, helping Canadian society more broadly to be inclusive in terms of governance, structure, language, human resources, education, and all sorts of things. And as for my friends, the people I run with, I'm a member of both the Institute on Theology and Disability and a committed group of scholars within the American Academy of Religion. And we all talk about theology, faith, religious studies, disability, and access all the time. There are a couple flourishing Facebook pages that I could probably direct people to if you're interested, but it's just really helpful and inspiring to be part of those communities. That's me.
Thank you, Mike. Josh, what are some things that others have done to help your church be a healthier environment for you or other people with disabilities?
Well, this is Josh, of course, and so at Friends to Friends, we have really been out. We've been involved with the community of Ridgewood for a long time now, and I think one of the things is that we do as Friends to Friends is we kind of help the other people that don't understand what people with autism disabilities what their needs are and what's and I think that really we just tell the community of Ridgewood, or the whole entire world, actually, tell anyone if it's Ridgewood or just in Bergen County in general. We always tell people that Friends to Friends is a church where you belong, and a church that is there for you if you have a son, or if somebody had a child with autism or disability, but they would be able to come to Friends to Friends. We would give them guidance, and that's why our church works for all folks, because we're very accessible too. We're very, very accessible. And I think that the thing is, what I do is I try to help educate people on to understand better in a way and stuff. And especially as an individual with autism, myself, I always tell them that, to always be allowed to, just that friends to friends will always allow you to share your gift. And that's, one of the, and also too, is that, we do an access weekend at Friends to Friends, and that's what Pastor Joanne is one of the advocates for that too. She helps the community of Ridgewood and the that to understand that, to help educate them so that they understand and know, because a lot of the community in Ridgewood is not as open as sometimes. There's always that section where there's a bubble, and that's where Pastor Joanne and I come in to try and get people to be more inclusive and better understand. And that's why, and I think that's why I'm very happy Friends to Friends is in the community of Ridgewood, because we're really helping people understand more as we keep moving forward. And so then, yes, thank you very much for that question.
You bet. And Cassie.
Yes, this is Cassie. And I think, like I said before, it starts with education. So if people with disabilities are willing to say, like Ellie talked about earlier, I need help, or it would be nice if my church could help with this, or for example, making your need known, I should say, is the first step. And then if you have a ministry team, such as a pastor or your elders or deacons who are willing to act on that expressed need. So we just welcomed a new pastor a few months ago. He's fairly young and he has a lot of energy, and he's constantly asking what he can do to help in various areas. Not only that, but he's constantly asking for other people's opinions. So like in front of church, he'll say, we've heard that there's issues with the sound system and that people can't hear the services very well. What do you think we should do about that? So come talk to me afterward, or let me know what you think we should do. And I joked with him a while ago. I said, well, if you ask for everyone's opinion, you're going to get a million different opinions, and then you have to decide what to do with that. But what I appreciate about that approach is that he does not want any need to go unmet. He wants people to express their concerns, or, especially if they can't hear or see our services. And so even though that approach of constantly asking for opinions is exhausting, I really think it's a good example of let's act on a need. So a couple of years ago, we really found that, hey, we don't have one of those automatic doors in our church, and it's really important. And someone said, well, that's really expensive. And another person said, no, I don't think it's that expensive. Let's do the research. Let's get it done. And so now we have an automatic door, which was long overdue. So I don't know, my answer is kind of rambly, but I think first of all, just like I said, educate. If you're a person with a disability, say what you need. Don't be afraid to ask your church for it. I've been asking my church for help with transportation for ages, because obviously I can't see well enough to drive. And we still haven't worked out an organized transportation program. I'd love to see fellow church members offer to help drive others around, especially to worship services. So that's a perceived need. And then the second thing is just, as a church, being willing to have volunteers to meet those needs, whatever they might be, and to be willing to hear about those needs and to act on them. So yeah, sorry for my kind of disorganized answer, but I was trying to talk it out as it was coming to mind. So
I didn't feel that was disorganized at all. I thought that was very well articulated.
Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Wade, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, I'm currently in the process of looking for a church. Like, I've been without a church family for quite a few months, probably a year or two. So yeah, I can't really answer that question other than, I've been in environments that are unhealthy and that are very hard to connect socially due to the stigma. So some of the things that I wish were done were accepting of me as a person, just taking me who I am and for all my foibles and flaws, and loving me the way that God loves me. Maybe that's a big task and a high ask, but I think being a place, like was said earlier, a place of healing and help would be helpful, rather than me thinking that I have to bring something to the table, rather than the church being there. Anyway, maybe I'm rambling too, but
No, you're not rambling. This is so very helpful. Thank you. All right. One of our last questions. How can the language used in church services and teachings be inclusive and respectful of all individuals, including those with disabilities? And Mike, if you're willing to go again.
Sure am. Hold on one
Thank
second.
you. You bet.
So I want to circle back to the we in the question about biblical healing narratives where we started.
Yeah.
So everyone in this Zoom room, we got to be careful about the ways that we use disability themed language. So if on one hand, our communities use it in ways that stigmatize, uncritically using crazy to mean intense or lame to mean stupid, for instance, and I've heard both of those a lot, we need to rethink our language, because discourse that uncritically uses those stigmatizing metaphors of disability is intellectually lazy at best and downright cruel at worst. If, on the other hand, we consider the preferences of each person for how they want to be addressed, whether they are deaf, blind, visually impaired, autistic, mobility challenged, any of that. We consider how people with those conditions want to be represented in speech and writing, and there are entire libraries written about these language issues. Then we will encounter greater success, because we will be using the names for these people that they use for themselves, that God uses for them. And we will therefore likely be speaking the way God wants us to speak to each other. And I say that because in general, the story of Scripture illustrates how the followers of Jesus can speak to each other in ways that reinforce dignity and preserve people's identities as well.
Thank you, Mike. Very, very true. Thank you. And Josh, how would you like to answer that question of how can the language used in church services and teachings be more inclusive and respectful of everyone, including those with disabilities?
So this is Josh, of course. So as I do agree with what Mike's point was the we, and that was yes. And I always, I think that too is that, we should say, I always say that friends to friends is everybody's church, whether you belong or not. You don't go to the church ever, or if you go maybe once, it's everybody's church, because, and what Pastor Joanne and I do is we don't just say, we use everyone's preferred pronouns, and we use that identifies them, or what they want to be, who they want to be referred to or as, or if they want to be, and we don't, and we always respect that. Like like Pastor Joanne and I always use like the pronouns, like she / her, and I will use my pronouns he / him. I know I don't put those on there often, but I do have to say they're very important to, like if saying like one of our congregants wants to be called, has a pronoun that they want to use, or we would definitely encourage inclusive be more inclusive about that. And we definitely are. I think one of the other things is that about the being more inclusive, how that we should be more inclusive with the Bibles is using language that is not so old school and is more inclusive and is for today, because we often forget that there are terms like people shouldn't. And I also think we use reserved accessibility bathrooms. So we will not use the term people. I think me and Pastor Joe, when we educate people on what terminology we should be using. So like we use reserved accessibility bathroom, not handicapped. We do not say that. We will not use that. It's not okay. We will not use that. And we say reserved accessibility bathroom because it means that it's reserved accessible, and we can't. And so we encourage those in the RCA to use the right terminology and the right that inclusives that is to being more inclusive, and especially the Bible too. Like we talk about that Jesus welcomed everyone at the Lord's table. So we must make sure that we use the right inclusive terminology to be that how Jesus welcomed everyone at the Lord's table. So, well, thank you very much for that wonderful question.
You're welcome, Josh. Thank you for answering. And Cassie,
Yeah.
how would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I've been prayerfully thinking about this question for ever since I got the questions a few weeks ago, because this one affects me as a person who plans the music and the worship part of the service, and I've kind of connected with some fellow worship leaders and music directors over the years about what do you do with song lyrics, for example, or even scripture that makes reference to things that would have a connotation to disability. For example, I was blind, but now I see, or walking with Jesus, or even the invitation of, okay, we're gonna enter into our time of worship. Please stand. Or sometimes you'll even hear, please stand if you're able. And sometimes I even wonder how to approach something like that, because as we've talked about numerous times today, every person with a disability prefers to be referred to in a certain way or thought of in a certain way. Some people can, this might be an unpopular way of saying it, but might be easily offended. We do live in a culture where it can be very easy to say the wrong thing or for someone to misinterpret it. And then you think, oh no, what did I just do? So that's why I was prayerfully considering how to answer this question, because I think in the confines of a worship service, it can be very easy to sing or to say the wrong thing. I could choose a song lyric that, for example, mentions blindness. I'm going to look at it, even as a visually impaired person, I'm going to look at it as spiritual blindness. And we referenced this earlier today too. Just because it says blind does not actually mean physical blindness or not being able to see. It means being blinded or not being able to see the way that God is working. So it's something that I constantly consider when I'm planning worship services. I'm looking at music for the theological content, making sure that it's good and edifying for our church to sing. But then I also have to think, okay, what else are we saying here? Are we potentially alienating or creating confusion for people who have disabilities or who have other concerns? Are we drawing them away from a relationship with the Lord because we've misunderstood? So I'd be interested at some point down the road to dig deeper into this issue, to hear from other pastors and worship leaders too. Like, what do we do with the language in song lyrics? What do we do with even biblical text, to make sure that we're not misconstruing something or drawing people away? So I hope that makes sense.
It did make sense. I would be interested in learning more about that too.
Yeah, I've always wondered what other perspectives are out there, because I've really struggled with it because I am blind and I know how here, so I'll even crack a joke here. I mean, someone met me a few months ago for the first time, and I said that I watched football, for example. And it got really awkward. They said, wait, you watch football? I said, well, yeah, don't you? And they're like, well, yeah, but you don't see. And I was like, well, watching for me is a lot of listening, but I do watch, just like, we go for a walk, or just simple language. Or I saw you yesterday. Well, maybe you didn't literally see me because I'm blind, but we use words, I think, so without thinking, if that makes sense. And it just comes out, and then we go, uh-oh, what did I just say? I don't get offended by that, but I think there are other people that are worried about offending someone or saying the wrong thing, which is what I brought up earlier. Like, I think we just live in a culture that's so easily offendable, and I don't know. I don't know what the right thing is to do. All I can do is plan our worship services and try to choose songs that are theologically sound, and hope that they don't offend or draw anyone away in the process. So, yeah.
Well, thank you, Cassie. I think you're on to something. I would be interested to hear more too, and thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Wade, how can the language used in church services and teaching be more inclusive and respectful of all individuals, including those with disabilities?
I can speak a little bit about this. I'll keep it short, but as a pastor, like when I prepared my sermons, I tried to think about the pastoral element. And I think the pastors and worship leaders attending today are very cognizant and aware of the disabilities and the need to be inclusive. So maybe not I'm preaching to the choir, but there's a lot of probably thousands of unanswered prayers and buckets full of tears sitting in front of you, versus a theological concept or a paragraph of writ that you have to describe. We are ministering to individuals who are real and who have real needs, wants, desires, that often go unanswered and unmet. And just wrapping one's arms around an individual with words and letting them know that they'll be okay, I think will go a long way.
I agree with you, Wade. Thank you for making that point. I think I'm passing it on to Lindsay right now.
Yes, we have just a couple of minutes to open it up for question and answer time with all of you. So if you have a question, please send it to Dan DeVries through the chat, Dan DeVries. And then he is in the room with Emily, and together we will get some more questions together. So if that's not accessible for you, you can use the raised hand feature, but if we can try to do chat, if you're able, that is helpful in speeding us along a little bit, because we don't have a lot of time left. So we hope we can address a few questions. This was a great panel. I just want to thank all of you for your open sharing from the heart. Just a really great group of people with so much wisdom here.
That's kind, Lindsay. Thanks for having us. Sorry,
Yeah,
this is.
and this is Mike. It's good to be here. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lindsay. This is Josh, everyone, and I want to thanks for having us. Thank you very much, Lindsay and Emily.
Welcome. There seems to be a question from Patricia Johnson.
Yes, hi. I'm sorry. I know that we have less time and I will try to speak quickly. But I just wanted to a lot of it is affirmation. I've worked for like 20 years. One of my jobs was in a group home for people with special needs. So I'm familiar with the community, and so I basically wanted to say to Cassie, it's good seeing you.
I was
I'm
gonna
from,
say that.
yes, you know me
I've
from
heard your
Lament. So
voice. Yeah, I
yes,
heard
so
your voice.
I wanted to say hi, and
That's
I'm
Patricia.
familiar with Reverend Joanne. So Josh, she speaks so highly of you, and it's great seeing you. And I've watched Friends to Friends also. One of my I guess I'll jump to a question, a thought which I had from the first presentation. You know, there seems to be a disconnect between when people maybe are born with a disability or um, happen to have a disability, come into a disability at some midpoint in life when they're young. And then there's a disconnect from that stage of life to when on the other end, where we're older and we have degenerative situations, as Cassie mentioned, our eyesight, gets impaired. We have to wear hearing aids, things like that. And it's societal, and yes, it goes into the church that there is some sort of like a stigma that if you're born with, not being able to hear or see, that's supposed to be, all of the things we talked about scripturally and how that's addressed. But we don't look at that when you're older. It's like we honor our seniors, and this is just something that happens when you're older. But it is, we do get disabled a little bit. It slows us down, impairs us from being able to function in certain ways. So, that's just my kind of like comment and um thought that people need to change that way of thinking. Think of it like, there but by the grace of God go I. Really, that's how I see it, because I can be fine, but I don't know my hearing. One ear is not as bad, not as good as the other, and that sort of thing. So that was the biggest comment that I had.
Yeah,
And I,
Cassie, if I could just quickly respond to that. Thank you again, Patricia. Yeah, it's so great to see you and to hear your voice. I think you're right. There's a disconnect between people who are born with a disability and then those who acquire it later on in life. In fact, I've been asked to talk with people in our local church, like, "Oh, you're blind. I want you to talk to my grandma who has macular degeneration." And so I'll talk to the grandma and we'll have a good conversation because obviously we can relate to having limited vision. But I've always not been able to see. I've always not been able to drive a car. I've not been able to do certain things. And these individuals who are acquiring their challenges later in life are suddenly losing that independence. They were able to drive and now they can't, or they were able to volunteer or to work in a certain job and now they can't. And that's something that I can't relate to. I think in some ways, and maybe someone will argue with me, but I think sometimes it's easier to just be born with your disability because to you it's just nothing new. You've always had it, you probably always will. But I think it's a different challenge and even maybe more challenging to acquire a disability later in life and have to kind of battle with that and learn your new reality. So thank you for bringing that up because I think it's very important to acknowledge aging and disability for sure.
yeah, and this is Mike. Thanks, Cassie.
Yeah.
I wanted to jump in and I kind of jumped over you, Cassie. Pardon me.
It was okay. I
Um,
didn't know we were going to talk. So
yeah. So Patricia, the question I had is, which society do you live in that honors its elders? Because I'm a follower of a lot of people on Instagram, and most of them are young and beautiful and fit and super tan. Our society does not honor its elders as much as you might think.
Well, I'd like to think so. I'd like to think I raised my kids too, and in my family, I'm of a different generation. So I get you, though. I understand.
sure.
I have a question here if we have time, Lindsay. Shelley asks, does anyone know of a Bible translation being developed with a disability lens?
This is Mike. I will have to look it up. My colleagues have pointed it out to me before, but I'll go and I'll send it to Lindsay after we're done. I know there's one because there's a Bible commentary by theologians who have disabilities. So I'm certain that there has to be an actual translation being written with us in mind.
That would be great if you could give that to Lindsay. Thank you. And it looks like Larry, I don't know how to say your last name.
And so that's okay. Just a couple of points. Person that was asking about doing the music, our pastor automatically, please rise if you're able or in spirit. And so we have a number in our place, they sit and they feel very comfortable and they comment that it's nice that we welcome that you're rising in spirit. And we get some of our elder population that do the same thing. The next one is, this book. That's the one that I didn't see mentioned today, but it's one that has really worked well. We've used this for book study. We've used this for our Bible study. And it talks, one of the things about resisting ableism in the church, the terminology, just going through and doing that implicit association test about determining the terminology you're using and how that turns the people with disabilities off. And the other one that she talks about in here too is the CRIP camp video, that won that award. It's so good. And I'm now showing it to my congregation next Sunday. And that's very helpful. That's my comments.
Thank you, Larry. And can you, I think the book that you were holding up was My Body Is Not a Prayer Request. Is that correct?
That's right. Disability Justice in the Church by Amy Kenny.
Okay, thank you.
Emily, this is Cassie. I kind of have an answer to the Bible translation question.
Okay.
It's not really Bible translation. The only thing I can think of is, and I have it in my hand, I don't know if it'll show up on camera, it's the Beyond Suffering Bible, and it's from Johnny Erickson Tata. It's not directly affiliated with disability per se, but I have read a great portion of it interspersed with the stories in the Bible. Johnny and her people talk about various stories from a disability lens. And so you'll see kind of a square box that will appear in the middle of the text, or kind of a drop down kind of section. And so stories are looked at from a disability lens, I guess, if you will, but it's not necessarily its own translation. But I think it's a good resource. I actually purchased the Bible just a few months after my retina detachment, where I lost all of my vision back in 2017, and it was really encouraging to me. So that could be a resource if you're looking for the Bible told through the lens of disability.
I think so. Thank you, Cassie, for that.
I would like to answer Larry's question about the music.
Sure.
So, being a worship leader and stuff at Friends to Friends, I usually tell people that to just get into the Holy Spirit, and I always tell them just that I don't tell them to stand or anything, because a lot of our folks at Friends to Friends cannot stand, and so we just tell them they'll let the Holy Spirit time to get in it with the Holy Spirit. And also too, like, I like the book that he was holding up about disability, and the justice is something that Pastor Joanne and I are always doing. We're always getting into it with we're always trying to bring justice. Disability justice is one of our top priorities, and I think that would be that's good that your church is using that as for a Bible study. And also too, I've been I think that from one of my to relate to Larry's book too, I actually watched the movie called about a girl who actually had her name was Kennedy. Hansen, and Kennedy Hansen, she had gotten a disability, and it was, she passed away, unfortunately, at such a young age, but her family, I follow on Facebook, and they're very good. They're a good family, and I think that if I ever, I know that she has the book out, and I have to get it so that I can maybe do it as a book study with Friends to Friends, because it's a very inspirational story. So I'm very, but thank you very much for answering, and that